Hi, I'm Leah. I'm 18, and I'm from a small town in Iowa, where people care more about Friday night football than their daughter's dreams. Here's the story of the day I decided I didn't need my father's approval to shine, and how I made prom night unforgettable without him. It started with a phone call. I remember standing in my bedroom that Thursday afternoon, surrounded by the artifacts of my carefully constructed identity. Calculus textbooks stacked like fortifications, science fair medals hanging from the bulletin board, and a single dress catalogue splayed open on my desk. The juxtaposition wasn't lost on me. The brain and the heart in perpetual negotiation. Dad, I need to pick up my dress for prom, they said. It's ready. A long silence stretched between us, like the miles of cornfields outside our town. Then his voice came through. Cold, disinterested. Are you really going to that nonsense? I thought you'd have grown out of that girl stuff by now. That sentence hit like frostbite. So cold, it burned. I stood there in my tiny bedroom, hand gripping my phone until my knuckles turned white. The dress catalogue still open to page 17, where a sapphire blue gown seemed to mock me with its possibility. It's my senior year, I said, hating the defensive edge in my voice. It's kind of important to me. Leah, he sighed, like he couldn't believe I was wasting his time with this triviality. You're not that type. Prom is for girls like your cousin Brittany. You're different. You study. You don't need dresses and photos and fairy tales. That was his way of saying, I wasn't pretty enough, not delicate enough, not worthy enough. What he actually meant was, don't embarrass yourself by pretending to be something you're not. What I heard was, don't embarrass me. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back, but inside, something was already breaking. A fault line that had been developing for years, finally giving way. You see, my dad was always the coach, the man with the whistle, the loudest voice at the football games. To him, being useful meant being strong, invisible, quiet. I was always smart Leah, the one who helped tutor the players, ran spreadsheets for his fundraiser events, the girl with straight A's and a ponytail. He never called me beautiful, never offered to buy me a dress, but he always made time to take my brother to basketball tryouts. When I was 8, I asked him to come to my piano recital. He didn't. He said, music isn't real work. When I was 12 and won the spelling bee, he nodded and said, that's what you're supposed to do. When I got into the regional science fair at 16. That's great, but don't let it go to your head. I learned early that my achievements were expected, not celebrated, like breathing or growing taller. They were the baseline, not the exception. But prom was different. Prom was something I wanted for me. My mother noticed me standing there, phone still clutched in my hand, staring at nothing. He said no, she asked, leaning against my doorframe. Her voice carried that familiar, resigned tone, the one that said she wasn't surprised, yet was still disappointed on my behalf. He doesn't think it's my thing, I replied, making air quotes with my fingers. She crossed the room and sat on my bed, smoothing out a wrinkle in my comforter. A nervous habit, like she was trying to iron out the complications of our family dynamics. Your father, she began, then stopped herself. This was the dance we'd done for years. She would almost criticize him, then retreat to neutral territory. He just wants what's best for you. No, I said, surprising both of us with my certainty. He wants what's easiest for him to understand. So I worked, every weekend, at the diner, off the highway, where truckers left decent tips, and the manager let me pick up extra shifts during finals week because he respected that I was going places. I saved every dollar, Every quarter, even the occasional 5, someone would leave when I remembered their complicated coffee order. My goal, that sapphire blue dress with the off-shoulder lace that I saw in the boutique window downtown. I didn't need my father's money, but a part of me still wanted him to say, "You deserve it." The week before prom, I tried one more time. I caught him in his study, that sacred space where he reviewed game tapes and drafted plays, where the walls were lined with team photos and not a single picture of me. "Dad, they have a father-daughter photo session at school. Just a quick one. Most girls are going with their dads. It would mean a lot." He barely looked up from his paperwork. X's and O's, mapping out victories that didn't include me. "I have a meeting. Can we reschedule? Just for 15 minutes. His eyes met mine, hard as river stones. "Leah, stop acting like a child. You're not one of those glittery girls. You're better than that." It wasn't just rejection. It was erasure. A father saying his daughter wasn't worthy of even being seen beside him. I left the room. I didn't cry. Not yet. But that night, I sat on my bed and stared at the ceiling with its glow-in-the-dark stars I'd arranged in accurate constellations years ago. Orion's belt hovering above me like a celestial scorekeeper. I thought of all the times I played by his rules, all the times I made myself small so he wouldn't call me dramatic, all the events I skipped to drive him to coaching workshops. And now, for one night, when I asked him to simply stand beside me, he couldn't even fake pride. I needed a plan, because I was going to prom, and I wasn't going to show up alone. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hi, Mr. Ronan, it's Leah. Leah Mitchell." "Leah! Well, this is a pleasant surprise." His voice was warm, like fresh bread. Nothing like my father's clipped, efficient speech. "I know this might be strange, but would you go to prom with me?" The words tumbled out in a rush before I could reconsider. He laughed, startled. "Leah, are you serious? I'm flattered, but aren't I a bit overqualified?" Mr. Ronan was my neighbor growing up. He used to fix bikes for free and played the piano at community events. His wife died when his daughter was young, and then his daughter passed away at 13 from leukemia. He was the only man who ever called me brave. Once, when I was 9, and stood up to Tommy Jenkins for pulling my hair, and again when I delivered a science presentation to the entire school, despite a raging fever. "You're not a date," I explained. "You're a stand-in dad, just for one night." I paused, feeling suddenly vulnerable. "My father won't go." There was a silence, and for a moment I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Then a soft, emotional exhale. "You have no idea how honored I'd be," he said, his voice thick with something I couldn't name. "Caitlin would have been your age this." Yeah, Caitlin, his daughter. The one who never got to go to prom. Is this too much to ask?" I suddenly worried I was reopening wounds. "No, Leah," he said firmly. "Sometimes the universe gives us chances to heal in ways we never expected. This is one of those times." And just like that, everything began to fall into place. I picked up my dress 2 days before prom. I walked into the boutique alone, the bell over the door announcing my presence. Mrs. Herrera, the owner, greeted me with a smile that held no pity, only anticipation. "I've been waiting for you to come claim this masterpiece," she said, disappearing into the back room. She returned with my dress ensconced in protective plastic. With practiced hands, she unzipped the covering to reveal that shimmering sapphire fabric, the color of deep water, of evening skies, just after sunset. "Let's make sure it fits perfectly," she said, ushering me toward the changing room. I'd zipped myself into that sapphire dream, looked in the mirror, and for the first time, I didn't wonder what Dad would say. I asked myself, "Do you feel beautiful?" And I did. Not because the dress transformed me into someone else, but because it revealed parts of me that had always been there, hidden under practical sweaters and sensible jeans. Mrs. Herrera stood behind me, her hands gently adjusting the shoulder seams. "Who is the lucky boy?" she asked, her accent curling around the words. "No boy," I said. "I'm going with Mr. Ronan." Her hands paused. "Arthur Ronan, from Maple Street," I nodded, watching her expression in the mirror. "That man," she said, returning to her adjustments, "has carried more sorrow than most people could bear. But he still brings me cookies at Christmas and checks my porch light when the weather is bad." She met my eyes in the reflection. "You chose well, Leah Mitchell." Prom night arrived with all the ceremony and nervousness that attends such milestones. My mother helped me with my hair, soft curls, silver pins that caught the light when I moved my head. "You look beautiful," she whispered, and I could see in her eyes that she was imagining a different scene, one where my father stood proudly beside me instead of holed up in his study, deliberately absent. "He doesn't know what he's missing," she added, her voice a mix of sadness and defiance. At 6 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. My mother went to answer it while I took one last look in the mirror. The girl who stared back at me wasn't just smart Leah or the coach's daughter. She was simply Leah, finally visible to herself. Mr. Ronan stood in our entryway in a tailored suit and tie that matched my dress, sapphire blue against crisp white. He must have gone shopping specifically for this occasion. He held out his arm, smiling like I was royalty. "Shall we, Miss Leah?" My mother insisted on pictures. Dozens of them. Me alone. Me with Mr. Ronan. Different angles, different poses. She was overcompensating for my father's absence, creating evidence of a moment he chose to miss. "Your mom's going to break the camera," Mr. Ronan whispered, conspiratorially, as she fussed with the settings for the 15th time. "She's making up for lost time," I whispered back. His eyes softened with understanding. Sometimes people don't know what they have until they see it through someone else's eyes. We arrived at the school gymnasium in a classic convertible borrowed from his friend, a 1965 Mustang, the color of champagne. Heads turned, whispers floated through the parking lot like dandelion seeds. I heard snippets as we passed groups of students. "Who's that with Leah?" "Is that her dad?" "No, her dad's Coach Mitchell." "Then who?" I didn't care. I walked in, chin high, hand in the arm of a man who made me feel valued. The gymnasium had been transformed, with twinkling lights and paper stars hanging from the ceiling, a budget attempt at Starry Night, this year's theme. It was beautiful in that earnest, trying too hard way that defined so many high school efforts. We checked in with Mrs. Pembroke, the English teacher who organized prom every year. She looked momentarily confused when she saw Mr. Ronan. "I'm Leah's escort for the evening," he explained smoothly. "Arthur Ronan." Recognition dawned on her face. "Oh, of course. You were on the community theatre board, weren't you?" He nodded. "Still am, though we're always looking for new blood if you're interested." Just like that, awkwardness dissolved into easy conversation. Mr. Ronan had that gift, making people feel comfortable, finding common ground. My father could command a room, but Mr. Ronan could warm one. We took our photo at the professional backdrop, me in my sapphire dress, Mr. Ronan in his matching tie. I stood tall, shoulders back, radiating a confidence I was still learning to inhabit. The photographer, a bored-looking man in his 40s, barely glanced at us. "Next," he called, before the flash had even faded from my vision. But we weren't quite done. Mr. Ronan approached him. "Excuse me, but could we get one more? I'd like a copy to send to my wife. She's been gone a long time, but she wouldn't forgive me if I didn't share this moment with her." The photographer's expression softened. He gestured us back to the backdrop. "Take your time. Let's make this one count." This time, I felt something shift. The lights, the music, the laughter. It all wrapped around me like a second skin. I wasn't an imposter anymore. I belonged here, in this moment, claiming joy that was rightfully mine. My friends surrounded me, gushing, cheering. Even Jessica Carmichael, who rarely spoke to anyone outside her tight social circle, complimented my dress when the DJ played. A slow song, Vienna by Billy Joel, a choice that made most of my classmates groan, but sent a thrill through me. Mr. Ronan offered a formal bow, and we danced. Gentle, kind, respectful. "Thank you," I said, halfway through the song. "For doing this," he smiled, a touch of sadness around the edges. "Thank you for asking me. Some wounds never fully heal, but nights like this, they help." That night, I wasn't the girl whose father stayed home. E was the girl who chose herself. And when the photos went up on the school board the next week, the caption beneath ours read, "Not all heroes wear capes. Some show up in a suit for the daughter who deserves the world." My father never commented. But when he saw the picture, I know he did, because I watched him pause in the hallway, staring at it longer than necessary. I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret? Maybe. Confusion? Certainly. But by then, it didn't matter, because I had written my own story, and I looked stunning in sapphire. What I didn't expect was what happened next. The Monday after prom, I was called to Principal Donovan's office. I sat in the outer office, mentally, reviewing any possible infractions. Had Mr. Ronan violated some unwritten rule about non-relative escorts? Had I broken some dress code I wasn't aware of? Mrs. Phillips, the principal's secretary, gave me a reassuring smile. "You're not in trouble, dear." Quite the opposite. Before I could ask what that meant, Principal Donovan opened her door. "Leah, come on in." Her office was neat but warm. Family, photos mixed with academic credentials, a bookshelf that held equal parts educational theory and contemporary fiction. She gestured for me to sit. "I wanted to talk to you about your prom attendee choice," she began. My defenses immediately rose. "There's no rule against bringing a family friend." She held up her hands. No, you misunderstand. I thought it was wonderful." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "I've known Arthur Ronan for 15 years. What he's been through. Well, most people wouldn't have recovered. Your invitation was a gift to him, whether you realized it or not." I shifted in my seat. "He was the gift to me, actually." "That's what makes it special," she said with a genuine smile. "But that's not why I called you here. The Westridge Women's Alliance is hosting a conference next month, Redefining Strength, Young Women Breaking Barriers. They're looking for student speakers who exemplify personal courage. I'd like to nominate you." I blinked, trying to process her words. "For going to prom. For having the wisdom to create your own support system when the traditional one wasn't available. For turning what could have been a disappointment into something meaningful." She paused. "And yes, for going to prom." 2 weeks later, I found myself standing backstage at the Westridge Community Center, clutching note cards that suddenly seemed inadequate. The audience was larger than expected. Women of all ages, some men, community leaders, and a scattering of my classmates who had come to support me. My mother sat in the front row, unable to contain her pride. Mr. Ronan was beside her. My father's seat was empty. The moderator introduced me with a flourish that made me sound much more accomplished than I felt. A young woman who reminds us that courage sometimes looks like a blue dress and a borrowed car. I walked to the podium, set down my notes, and looked out at the sea of expectant faces. My prepared speech felt suddenly wrong, too rehearsed, too safe, so I did something that smart Leah never would have done. I abandoned the script. My name is Leah Mitchell. I began, my voice shaking slightly. And until 3 weeks ago, I thought being strong meant being useful and invisible. I told them everything about growing up as the coach's daughter, about academic achievements that went uncelebrated, about learning to take up less space. I talked about the phone call, about the dress I bought with diner tips, about Mr. Ronan and his daughter who never got to go to prom. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do, I said, finding my rhythm now, is to claim joy that others think you don't deserve, to show up for yourself when no one else will. As I spoke, I noticed a figure slip into the back of the auditorium. Tall, broad-shouldered, with that distinctive stance. I'd know anywhere. My father. He stood against the wall, arms crossed, face unreadable. I faltered for a moment, then continued with renewed determination. I used to think that being seen was something other people granted you. That visibility was a gift bestowed by those with power. But that night, in that blue dress, I learned that visibility is something you claim for yourself. When I finished, the applause was immediate and overwhelming. People stood. Some wiped tears. Ms. Donovan flashed me a thumbs up from the side of the stage, but my eyes sought only one face, that familiar stone countenance at the back of the room. My father was gone. After the conference, everything moved fast, too fast. My inbox filled with messages, some from strangers, some from girls at school, even one from the superintendent who wanted to share my speech at the district's annual parent-student event. My mother tried to shield me from the ones that were less kind, the anonymous messages accusing me of trying to embarrass my family. But I read them anyway. One in particular stood out. You're just a drama queen pretending to be a victim. You're not brave. You're pathetic. No name, no face. But I read it 3 times. Then I hit print, folded the paper in half, and slid it into the back of my speech binder. It wasn't worth a reply, but it was proof. Proof that I had struck a nerve. The summer passed in a whirlwind. I worked more shifts at the diner, saved money for college, and tried to prepare myself for leaving the only town I'd ever known. Mr. Ronan and I stayed in touch. Sometimes he'd drop by with old jazz records and tell stories about his daughter, how she'd wanted to be a marine biologist. Sometimes we'd just sit in silence on the porch, letting the cicadas do the talking. Leah, he told me one evening, as the sky turned the color of bruises. The world is always going to try to tell you who you are. The trick is deciding they don't get to. My mother seemed different too, more assertive. She signed up for a photography class and started talking about maybe going back to school herself. One night, I overheard her on the phone. I'm not asking your permission, Jim. I'm telling you I'm taking this course. Leah will be gone soon, and I need something for myself. My father remained distant, but there was a new quality to his silence. Less dismissive, more contemplative. He still spent most evenings in his study, but sometimes I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. His expression puzzled, as if trying to solve an equation with variables he didn't understand. Then, one evening, in late August, my father knocked on my bedroom door. Leah, can I talk to you for a minute? I was packing for college, folding the last few shirts, slipping books into boxes. I paused, nodded. He stepped inside, awkward, like the room was foreign territory. And maybe it was. I couldn't remember the last time he'd been in my bedroom. He held something in his hand, an envelope. "Your aunt sent me a video of your speech," he said quietly. I watched it. Twice. I didn't know what to say. I sat on the edge of my bed, waiting. The air between us felt charged, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. He held out the envelope. I took it, opened it slowly. Inside were 2 photographs, one of me and Mr. Ronan at prom, and another, older photo, me at 6, in a cardboard crown, holding a mud pie. My father beside me, laughing. "That day," he said, pointing to the old photo, "you made me promise that I'd clap the loudest for you at your wedding. You said I was your favorite person." I felt my chest tighten. And then I forgot what that meant. I convinced myself that protecting you meant hardening you, that telling you to be tough would somehow make life easier. He sat heavily on my desk chair, looking suddenly older than his 47 years. "I failed you." The room was quiet, except for the hum of the ceiling fan and the distant sound of my mother making dinner downstairs. "I'm not asking for a do-over," he said, "but I am asking for a start." I looked at the photos again. My hand trembled slightly. I thought of every missed recital, every ignored text, every time he made me feel small. But I also thought of the speech, of the hundreds of girls who'd written to me, of the strength I built, not because of him, but in spite of him. "I don't hate you," I whispered. He sat down across from me. "I know, but I don't want to just be the dad who missed prom." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. He reached over, took my hand, and for the first time in years, didn't try to fix me or reshape me. He just sat. We stayed like that for several minutes, the silence no longer hostile but hesitant, like a space being carefully cleared of debris. "I'm leaving for college in 3 days," I finally said. He nodded. "I know. I need time." "I know. That too." He stood, straightening his shoulders in that coach-like way, as if preparing for a difficult play. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." After he left, I sat looking at the photos. The juxtaposition was startling. The little girl with mud on her cheeks, an absolute trust in her eyes, and the young woman in sapphire blue, standing beside a man who wasn't her father. The narrative arc of my childhood, captured in 2 frozen moments. I slipped both photos into my college-bound suitcase. Not because I had forgiven him, but because both were true parts of my story. College was another world. New people, new expectations. No one knew who my father was. No one called me, and smart Leah, the coach's daughter. I was just Leah. During orientation week, I met my roommate Zoe, a vibrant girl from California who wore mismatched socks on principle and had strong opinions about breakfast cereals. "So what's your thing?" she asked on our first night as we both lay in our respective twin beds, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. "My thing? Yeah, everybody has a thing. Like I'm the girl who does roller derby and makes weird sculptures out of found objects. What are you known for?" I thought about it. In high school, I had been known primarily in relation to my father or my academics. Neither felt right anymore. I'm the girl who went to prom with her elderly neighbor because her dad refused to take her and then gave a speech about it that went viral in 3 counties, I said, the words tumbling out in one breath. Silence. Then Zoe propped herself up on one elbow, her face illuminated by the streetlight filtering through our thin curtains. "Holy shit," she said, with genuine admiration. "That's not a thing. That's a statement." I joined a women's leadership group, helped start a mentorship circle, and began writing essays for the student publication. I took classes that challenged me, not just academically, but emotionally. literature that made me question my assumptions, philosophy that gave me frameworks for understanding my own experiences. One day, I submitted a personal narrative about prom, about Mr. Ronan, and about the father I'd learned to forgive, not for his sake, but for mine. The piece was raw, honest, more vulnerable than anything I'd written before. It went viral beyond our campus, picked up by websites that focused on women's stories and family dynamics. A week later, a publishing house reached out. They wanted to turn my story into a memoir, a reflection on modern fatherhood, self-worth, and the courage to define oneself, according to the enthusiastic editor who called me. When I got the first advance check, I called Mr. Ronan. "Can I take you to dinner? My treat." He laughed. "Only if you let me wear my old tuxedo." We met at Giovanni's, the fancy Italian place that had always seemed off limits to my diner waitress budget. He didn't wear the tuxedo, but he did wear a tie. Blue, of course. "To what do I owe this honor?" he asked as we settled into our table. I explained about the book deal, pulling out the contract to show him. His eyes widened as he scanned the page. "Leah, this is substantial." I nodded. "And you're in it, a big part of it." "I wanted to make sure you're comfortable with that." He considered this, taking a sip of his water. "Will you tell the whole truth? About Caitlin? About why I said yes? Only if you want me to." He nodded slowly. "I do. People should know that sometimes our deepest wounds become the spaces where we can help others heal." He reached across the table, patted my hand. "I'm proud of you, you know. Not just for the book or the speeches, for becoming exactly who you are." I had heard those words so many times in the months since prom. From my mother, from teachers, from strangers who read my article. But hearing them from Mr. Ronan, I finally believed them. "I'm still figuring out who that is," I admitted. He smiled. "That's the best part." My first semester of college passed in a blur of classes, writing sessions, and late-night conversations with Zoe about everything from politics to whether cereal is technically a soup. She maintained it was. I called my mother weekly. I sent Mr. Ronan postcards from campus. I didn't call my father, but at Thanksgiving, when I came home, he was there at the kitchen table, attempting to make place cards for dinner, a task my mother had always handled. "Your mother's teaching me about presentation," he explained, his big hands awkward with the small scissors. "Apparently, it matters how things look, not just how they function." There was something vulnerable in the admission, in the way he carefully wrote my name on cardstock, adding a small star beside it. We navigated the holiday with careful politeness, like diplomatic relations between countries with a complicated history. My father asked about my classes. I told him about my professors. He didn't mention the book deal, though I knew my mother must have told him. After dinner, as I helped clear the table, he finally broached the subject. "Your mother says you're writing a book." I nodded, stacking plates with more concentration than the task required. "About prom? About us?" "About me," I corrected. "You're part of the story, but it's my story." He absorbed this, running a hand through his hair, grayer now than it had been in summer. "I suppose I deserve whatever you write." "It's not about what you deserve," I said, surprising myself with the gentleness in my voice. "It's about what happened and what it meant to me." The book came out on the anniversary of my prom. We held a small reading at the local library. My mom brought cookies. Mr. Ronan brought flowers. And my dad? He brought a handwritten letter. When I opened it later that night, this is what it said. "You stood in a room full of strangers and showed them your heart. That's more courage than I ever had. I don't just see you now, Leah. I admire you. Love, Dad." I sat with that letter for a long time. Prom night had been about reclaiming joy. But this was about transformation. Not his, mine. Because I had taken every no, every silence, every dismissal, and turned it into something louder than applause. I had found power in being visible, and I would never disappear again. 2 years later, I stood backstage at another auditorium, bigger this time, filled with hundreds of people who had come to hear me speak about my book, which had somehow touched a nerve in the national conversation about fathers and daughters, about the subtle ways girls are taught to shrink themselves. My palms were sweaty. Public speaking never gets easier. You just get better at managing the fear. A text message lit up my phone. "You'll knock 'em dead. Zoe, still my roommate, still my biggest cheerleader." Another message followed. "We're in the 3rd row. Your mother saved seats." This one from my father. After the Q&A session, as I signed books for a line of readers, mostly women, but some men too, including fathers, holding copies with dog-eared pages, I spotted him standing off to the side, waiting, patiently. When the last reader left, he approached the table. "I wasn't sure you saw my text," he said. "I did," I replied. "Thank you for coming." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I wasn't sure if you'd want me here." I considered. This, 2 years ago, his presence would have filled me with resentment. A year ago, with anxious uncertainty. "Now, I wanted you to hear me," I said finally. "Really hear me." He nodded. I did, every word. We walked out together, into the lobby, where my mother and Mr. Ronan waited. The 4 of us made an odd picture. My mother with her new confidence and camera always around her neck. Mr. Ronan with his kind eyes and blue tie. My father with his coach's posture slightly softened. And me, no longer just smart Leah, or the coach's daughter, or even the girl in the sapphire dress. Just Leah, author, speaker, visible. As we stepped outside into the evening air, Mr. Ronan pulled something from his pocket, a small wrapped package. "Little graduation gift," he explained. Though I know it's still months away, I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a delicate silver pin in the shape of a star. "From Orion's belt," he said, "to remind you that even when you can't see your own light, others can." My father watched this exchange with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not jealousy exactly, but a complex mixture of regret and acceptance. Later, that night, as I packed up to return to campus, he knocked on my bedroom door again. This time, he didn't wait for an invitation to enter. "I've been thinking," he said, "about your graduation in May." I nodded, folding a sweater into my overnight bag. "Would it be all right if I came? To the ceremony, I mean." The question was so unexpected, so humble in its uncertainty, that for a moment I couldn't respond. "It's your choice," he continued. "I'll understand if you'd rather I didn't." I thought about the long road from that phone call, about the prom dress, to this moment, about the girl who once craved his approval and the woman who had learned to approve of herself. "I'd like you to be there," I said finally. "All of you, Mom, you, Mr. Ronan, my family, the one I was born with, and the one I chose." Something shifted in his eyes. A lightning, as if a burden had been set down. "Thank you." As he turned to leave, I remembered something. "Dad," he paused in the doorway. "Remember when I was 6, and I made you promise to clap the loudest at my wedding?" He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm holding you to that," I said. "But this time I want you to clap, because you're proud. Not because you,